Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, come have a slice of this homegrown, bespoke, Granny Smith apple pie I like to call Arena of Valor. Arena of Valor is a 5-on-5 MOBA. If you're not familiar with what that term is, there's no helping you. The two most popular MOBAs, League of Legends and Dota, are 5-on-5 affairs in a bird's eye or isometric perspective with your hero or champion leveling up through the accumulation of gold and experience. Now you can buy items, you can level up your abilities in different orders. There's a lot of nuances between the two, but ultimately you play essentially the hero unit in Warcraft 3. Arena of Valor is free and it's on phones. There was a recently released Nintendo Switch version last year, but let's dive into this gem. Now, being free to play does inherently mean there are multiple currencies involved. You have gold, gems, and vouchers in this game's case. Gold is used to purchase heroes and arcana, essentially runes. These range anywhere from 5,000 to 25,000 on the hero side, and your level 3, the highest level arcana, costs 2,000. You earn 50 to 150 gold per match, so this definitely is a grind. Now there are of course daily challenges, login bonuses, and a group with friends benefit to expedite this, but it's pretty slow. Gems, the second free currency you get through daily logins and challenges as well. This is exclusively used on a specific gem shop where you have double XP cards for a set amount of time. You can purchase rune packs, and they also have some gacha style treasure chests. There's another type of currency you can buy with gems, which is essentially a roulette wheel, but that's what they're used for. Vouchers, your premium currency, you can buy everything except arcana with these. Now the rates are not too bad. 100 vouchers is $1, and heroes range anywhere from 500 vouchers to 1,700 vouchers. In addition to heroes, you've got your costumes, you've got some various other items. You can also buy experience and gold doublers with vouchers. Essentially, everything else you can buy with vouchers. Down the left side of the screen, you've got the aforementioned shop. You've got your heroes here, which I'll touch on in a second. There's a customized section, which unfortunately isn't fully fleshed out yet. There's some battle effects, summon, kill effects, but they're not all in the game just yet. Under Armory, I'm going to touch on this in a second. Equipment, you can get equipment presets, which make the game a lot easier, especially if you're a first timer. Talents, essentially just a page to show your summoner spells. Arcana for your rune pages. Backpack and guild is going to have what you'd expect in there, your items and your guild network. Diving into the heroes, there are 6 archetypes that Arena of Valor uses to determine the heroes: tanks, warriors, assassins, mages, marksmen, and support. Tanks are your frontline beef characters. They are going to specialize in defensive items and crowd control abilities alongside a huge pool of health. This enables them to dive into the front line to help initiate fights as well as to peel from their backline. Warriors are a mix of assassin and tank, in that they'll buy damage items as well as defensive items. Think bruisers. These are going to be able to initiate fights without being full tank and be able to deal damage, albeit not as much as a full assassin. Assassins specialize on jumping onto targets and blowing them up. They have insanely high burst damage. The problem with assassins are if they get crowd controlled, they can sometimes be very easy to kill. They typically won't buy very many defensive items, if any, instead relying on picking off the backline marksmen and mages, the very squishy characters, getting in and getting out as quickly as possible. Mages rely on their abilities to deal damage as opposed to their normal attacks. Mages are important in that they force the enemy team to not be able to only buy physical armor. Marksmen offset the mage in that they typically don't rely a lot on their abilities. Instead, the bulk of their damage comes from their normal attacks. These are the most item dependent of all the classes. They need a huge ramp up in order to really be effective, but they are your hyper carries. They will be dealing the most damage of your team. Supports don't get a lot of love, but they are extremely necessary. shields, peels, stuns, heals, things like this, the support character is going to be your team's best friend. Like League, this map is split up into 3 lanes with someone on your team being in the jungle. Top, middle, and bot lane with a neutral river dividing the 2 halves of the map. The map is populated with neutral monsters, boss monsters, as well as various patches of tall grass with which to hide your character and ambush. The objective in Arena of Valor is to destroy the enemy's core. To do that, you need to make a path. Each lane has 3 turrets in it. You need to destroy all 3 turrets in at least one of the lanes in order to make the core vulnerable. Every few seconds, each core will push out a wave of creeps down each of its 3 lanes. These creeps will constantly push down their lane. If you're able to kill the enemy's creeps and push those creeps into their turret, you can put damage on the turret. Once you destroy the turret, you can move further down the lane into the next one. Some things to note right away. Arena of Valor does not have a shop either in your home base or on the map. The shop is handled by default on the left side of the screen. You simply tap the button and a full shop menu pops up. Whenever you purchase an item, it immediately goes into your inventory. You don't need to wait for a courier, and you don't have to recall back to base in order to make purchases. Another thing to note is that you will never spawn in the top right base. Even if you're on the opposite team, the map will flip, so you're always coming from the bottom left. What this means is if you're used to always heading to bot lane or top lane, you'll need to head to the opposite lane sometimes as the map is putting you in a different position. You can see this before diving into the match by clicking on the strategy button. More on that later. Like League, the heroes which go to each lane is partially determined by the map objectives that are close to them, so I'll dive into those now. Typically, the top lane or the Slayer lane is populated by your tanks or warrior classes. The Dark Slayer doesn't spawn until much later in the map, so there's typically not going to be a lot of action, and these characters need to be able to sustain in their lane without being pushed out and thus losing experience and gold. Mid lane is the shortest map, and you typically send a mage to this lane. The reason being, mages with their abilities are able to clear the waves faster than either top or bottom, and due to its proximity, they can quickly clear the wave and either head top or bottom to make a play, meaning to gank and kill an enemy hero or to put pressure on a turret. Bottom lane, or the dragon lane, is typically populated with a marksman and a support. The marksmen require the most items and the most build-up to perform at a good level, so the support is there to kind of baby and carry them through the early game when they're very vulnerable. Between the lanes is a space called the jungle. You will have a jungler on your team who's not assigned to a specific lane, but instead farms up the minions and monsters in these jungle areas. And their job is to farm up the monsters outside of the lanes, letting their dedicated laners gather all that experience and gold, instead relying on the jungle monsters and also the positioning of that to let them gank any of the lanes as need be. Now that we've touched on why the lanes are divided the way they are, let's briefly talk about the neutral monsters in Arena of Valor. The blue golem, once defeated, will give you a mana regen buff as well as an ability cooldown reduction. The red golem will grant you a slow and damage over time effect on your normal attacks. These are the 2 most readily available buffs to your jungler, and the ones that he'll typically gather before ganking his first lane. At the intersection of top and bottom to the river, there are 2 ethereal birds. Killing those birds will cause it to transform into an orb, which will slowly move throughout the enemy's jungle, granting you vision of that area. The Spirit Sentinel lies across the river from the Dark Slayer. Defeating that will give you HP regen per second as well as bonus movement speed that increases outside of combat. The first of the boss monsters, the Abyssal Dragon, will grant your entire team additional gold and experience. The enraged abyssal dragon will get replaced later into the match by the enraged abyssal dragon. Killing this will give your entire team a unique buff based on their class's archetype. Once killed, the abyssal dragon will also drop an abyssal stone. This item will grant the player who picks it up temporary invulnerability from one lethal blow. And finally, the Dark Slayer, the final boss monster. Defeating this will grant your entire team a HP and mana regeneration buff, as well as additional movement speed. Furthermore, the player who kills the Dark Slayer gets a summonable Drake, which can help you push the lanes. It'll use its own health to attack towers. Arena Valor, like most MOBAs, plays out in 3 distinct phases. Phase 1, the early game, or laning phase, encapsulates the time when heroes are first going to their lanes, poking the enemy hero, trying to gather a gold and experience advantage. The mid game occurs once the first turret has been destroyed by a team. Once a turret has been destroyed, both teams experience a shift in game dynamic. The team that destroyed the turret gathers a gold boost, as well as opening up a portion of the map. The enemy team loses vision from that turret and thus makes it harder for them to push safely out of their own territory. This is the first point in the game when you're likely to see all 5 members group up to push objectives. And finally, the late game. The late game occurs when heroes have reached level 15 as well as purchased complete item builds. The interesting thing to note with this is once you've hit that peak, you cannot go beyond that. Meaning, if an enemy team was getting steamrolled in the early and mid game, at a certain point, given enough time, they will reach parity with the opposite team, the excess experience and gold going to waste. As such, you typically won't see many professional teams lasting well into the late game, as the respawn timers for your heroes increase dramatically as the game goes on, leading to one team fight deciding who wins and loses that match. There are 2 main principles to keep in mind when playing MOBAs. The first one is the easiest to overlook. Objectives win games. It's extremely common to see your entire team drop whatever they're doing to run to the opposite side of the map just because someone showed up on their minimap. You'll often see lower ranked players kind of fumbling about in the mid game, and games drag on way too long even though one team has a clear advantage. The reason being, objectives are not being valued high enough. Kills do not win games. The destruction of turrets and thus the core is what leads to a victory. Getting kills presents your team with an opportunity to pressure a turret or a dragon or a dark slayer and continue that snowball. If your team is running from player to player getting kills, but they never convert those kills into actual turrets, you're not gaining any ground. It's important to keep that in mind. Every time you get a kill, you need to leverage that into an objective. And the second principle to keep in mind is don't die. Dying is extremely punishing in MOBAs. For one, it grants the enemy that killed you an experience and gold boost, but considering you're dead, you are not earning experience and gold for that period of time. As the game gets longer and longer, these respawn timers increase dramatically. Once you get more familiar with your hero and what the enemy heroes can do, you'll of course learn the proper ranges to be at, the proper cooldowns. You'll be able to know what items they have. You'll be able to understand the equipment they've bought and what that means in your particular matchup. But until that time happens, try not to die. I hope you guys enjoyed this and this was helpful. I'm going to do another tutorial on your first game in Arena of Valor and hopefully have more videos coming out. I really enjoy this game a lot. I hope this was helpful. I appreciate you and your time. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.